The throne chamber of the Vare Dominion was carved from black stone, its walls painted with the blood-red banners of victory. Fire bowls burned along the high pillars, filling the vast hall with smoke and shadow. The sound of heavy drums echoed like a heartbeat of war, announcing the arrival of prisoners taken from the latest conquest. On the high seat of obsidian sat Asera, the female war chief of the Dominion. Her body was covered in dark crimson scales that gleamed under the torchlight. Her horns were long and curved, a crown of bone that marked her as both ruler and executioner. For more than 2 centuries she had led her people across the stars, crushing resistance, enslaving worlds, and bending empires to her will. None dared stand before her. None dared question her. Her eyes, cold and sharp as blades, studied the hall below. Chains rattled as the prisoners were dragged forward. Broken warriors, pale nobles, and trembling survivors of the fallen world. Asera had seen it countless times before. Another conquered people. Another victory carved into the history of her reign. But this time, something was different. At the end of the line of captives, the soldiers pushed forward a single figure unlike the others. He was tall, walking upright without the bent back of submission. His skin was pale, his hair dark, and his eyes burned with a fire that froze Asera's breath in her chest. She gripped the armrest of her throne, her claws biting into the stone. For a heartbeat she could not move, could not breathe. The hall fell silent. The figure stopped in the center of the chamber, chains heavy around his wrists, but his head held high. He did not bow. He did not tremble. He stood as though he carried a weight greater than chains, but would not let it bend him. The war chief rose to her feet, her towering figure casting a long shadow across the chamber. Her voice, when it came, was low and filled with disbelief. "No, this is impossible." Her words echoed, silencing even the drums. "You cannot be what I see." The prisoner lifted his eyes and looked at her directly. For a long moment, the two locked stares, predator and prey, conqueror and captive. But the fire in his gaze was not praise-fear. It was something else. Something she remembered. Her claws trembled. She pointed one at him, her voice rising, shaking with emotion she had buried long ago. "No," she said again, louder this time. "No. I destroyed the last human 200 years ago." The words thundered through the hall. Gasps rose from the gathered soldiers and nobles. Whispers spread like wildfire. A human. But humans were only legends now. Ghosts of a race said to be extinct, erased from the stars by Asera's own claws. Yet here, one stood. Memories surged through her mind, unbidden, sharp as blades. She saw again the Great War, the war that had scarred the galaxy itself. She remembered fleets of human warships hurling themselves into impossible battles. She remembered cities burning, stars turned to weapons, worlds torn apart so that the Dominion could not have them. And she remembered the final battle. 2 centuries ago, above a dying sun, humanity had made its last stand. Their fleet was broken, their numbers scattered. Asera had stood upon the bridge of her flagship and watched as the last human ships charged her war armada in a blaze of fire. They had no hope of victory, yet they fought. They fought until their ships were nothing but ash and light in the void. She remembered stepping onto the battlefield of wreckage, walking among broken metal and shattered bodies. She remembered facing their last general, an old man with fire in his eyes even as his body failed him. She had raised her blade, driven it into his chest, and declared humanity extinct. That was the moment she had become eternal in her people's songs. The war chief who ended the humans. The war chief who broke the unconquerable. Yet here, standing before her throne, chained but unbroken, was proof of her failure. Her soldiers shifted nervously, waiting for her command. Some reached for their weapons, others bowed their heads. None dared speak. All eyes were on their ruler, and their ruler could not look away from the man before her. The human spoke no words, but his silence was louder than any scream. His presence alone was accusation. His very existence shattered the foundation of her pride. Her chest heaved. The weight of centuries pressed against her shoulders. She had built her throne on the claim of humanity's extinction. She had carried her title, her victories, her dominion, on the promise that humans were gone forever. And now, here stood a ghost made flesh. The war chief of the Dominion, who had never faltered, who had never known fear, whispered again, her voice breaking for the first time in 200 years. "No, I destroyed the last human. But her words did not change the truth. The last human stood before her, alive, and he was staring back into her soul. The throne chamber remained heavy with silence. The soldiers did not move. The nobles did not breathe. All waited for their war chief to speak, but Asera herself was trapped in a storm of memory. Her eyes stayed locked on the human, yet her mind was no longer in the chamber. It drifted back to the war that had shaped her life, the war that had defined her as ruler. She saw again the burning skies of the old battles. Human fleets, though smaller and weaker, had struck like knives in the dark. They had no vast empire, no endless resources, yet they fought with a madness that defied reason. Their ships were patched together with iron and fury, their weapons crude compared to Dominion technology. But they fought as if every battle was their last, as if their lives meant nothing and only victory mattered. She remembered how her generals had warned her, "Do not underestimate them." But Asera had laughed. Humans were fragile creatures, thin flesh, soft bones, weak senses. Compared to the scaled warriors of the Dominion, they were nothing. Yet when the war began, it was the Dominion who bled. Her fleets burned in systems they should have easily conquered. Whole planets turned to fire rather than bow. When captured, human prisoners spat in the faces of their captors even as they were executed. They did not fear death. They welcomed it, if it meant denying her victory. It had taken decades of endless war, sacrifice, and cruelty to bring them down. The Dominion had thrown countless armies at them. Asera herself had commanded battle after battle, crushing human colonies, burning their homes, scattering their survivors. Slowly, painfully, humanity had been driven into the corner of the galaxy, and finally came the last stand. Asera remembered it as clearly as the scars on her scales. A dying star, its light flickering weak and broken. Around it, the shattered remains of human worlds destroyed so the Dominion could not claim them. And in orbit, the final fleet of mankind, rusting warships, barely held together but still aiming their weapons with defiance. They had charged her fleet, knowing they could not win. Their ships tore through her armada like blades of fire, sacrificing themselves to take her warships down with them. One by one, their vessels turned into suns of destruction, burning themselves alive to wound her Dominion. Even now, the memory made her chest tighten. She remembered standing on the bridge of her flagship, staring at the madness of their courage. Every instinct had screamed to retreat, but she had not. She had stood firm and watched them burn, and then she had found their general. He was an old man, gray in hair, his body frail, yet his eyes had burned with the same fire she now saw in the prisoner before her. He had stood on a ruined command deck, weapon in hand, though he knew it would not save him. He had spoken words that haunted her still. "You cannot kill us. You can only bury us in fire." But fire spreads. She had silenced him with her blade, cutting his life away, and declared to her people that the last human was dead. That humanity was gone, and for 200 years she had believed it. Asera blinked, pulling herself back into the present. The prisoner stood before her throne, his face scarred, his body worn, but his eyes alive with the same unbroken spirit. The same fire. Her claws tightened around the hilt of her ceremonial blade. She wanted to strike him down, to end the ghost before it destroyed her once more. But something inside her chest, something buried under centuries of blood and pride, held her still. At last the human spoke. His voice was rough, cracked from captivity, yet it carried clearly across the chamber. "You thought you ended us." His words were calm, but sharp as a knife. "But humans do not end so easily. You burned our worlds, you slaughtered our people, and still, here I stand. We endure, we hide, we return." The chamber filled with whispers. Soldiers shifted uneasily. Nobles looked to one another with fear. None had ever heard such words spoken before their war chief. To defy her so openly was death. Yet the human did not tremble. He stood like stone before a storm. Asera's throat tightened. She wanted to deny him, to laugh, to crush the words under her heel. But she could not, for in his eyes she saw the truth. She took a step closer, her shadow falling over him. "Who are you?" she demanded. The man lifted his chin. His chains rattled, but his voice did not shake. "My name is Elias Kane, and I am proof of your failure." The words struck her harder than any blade. Proof. Proof that her great victory, her eternal song, her throne itself, was built on a lie. Her soldiers looked to her for command. Her nobles trembled in silence. The hall itself seemed to wait for her answer, but Asera, the war chief who had never bent, never faltered, never doubted, felt her heart crack. For the first time in centuries she knew fear. The heavy silence in the throne chamber pressed down like a weight. No one moved. The guards, armed and armored, shifted uneasily but dared not interrupt. The nobles glanced at each other, fear and confusion written across their faces. They had never seen their war chief hesitate, never seen her stare at a prisoner as if he were something more than flesh and bone. But Asera could not look away. The man stood tall despite the chains pulling on his wrists. His shoulders were straight, his gaze steady. He was scarred, bruised, weary from captivity. Yet there was a strange strength in him. It was not the strength of muscle or weapon. It was something deeper, something that reminded her of the old war. You, Asera's voice trembled, though she fought to control it. You should not exist. I killed the last of your kind with my own claws. The man tilted his head slightly. His lips curled not into a smile but into something sharper, a look of defiance. You thought you killed us, he said softly, his voice carrying through the hall like a spark in dry grass. But humans are not so easily erased. We survive. Even in the shadows, even when fire consumes us, we endure. The words struck like arrows. The nobles gasped, whispering among themselves. The guards tightened their grip on their weapons, waiting for Asera's command to silence him. Yet she raised no hand. Instead, she stepped down from her throne. Each step echoed on the stone floor. Her eyes, usually cold and sharp, flickered with something that had not been seen for centuries. Uncertainty. She circled the prisoner slowly, her claws scraping the ground. You speak as though you are the voice of your kind, but your kind is gone. Her words came out like a growl, but she could feel her chest tightening. You are nothing more than a ghost clinging to the past. The man raised his head higher. His chains rattled, but his stance never broke. Then call me a ghost if you wish, he answered. But remember, ghosts haunt the living, and your dominion has much to answer for. The hall grew colder with those words. A murmur rose, fear rippling through the nobles who lined the chamber walls. Never before had someone dared to speak to the war chief this way and lived. Asera felt her claws itch with the urge to strike him down. It would be easy. One swing of her blade and his defiance would end. But her arm would not move. Instead, she felt a strange stirring inside her chest, an echo of the fire she had once seen in humans long ago. You stand here in chains, she said, her voice tightening. Yet you speak as if you are the victor. The human met her gaze without blinking. Because chains do not decide victory. Spirit does, and my spirit is not broken. For a moment, the great hall felt small, as though it was only the two of them, war chief and prisoner, conqueror and survivor. Asera stopped in front of him, her face inches from his. She studied his eyes. Yes, it was the same fire, the same unshakable will she had tried so hard to crush 2 centuries ago. She felt her chest twist, not with anger, but with something she had forgotten long ago, regret. Her voice dropped to a whisper, though all could hear it in the silent chamber. Who are you? The man breathed deeply before answering. His words were slow, steady, unyielding. My name is Elias Cain, son of a line you thought destroyed, child of a people you swore extinct. I stand here not for myself, but for every voice you silenced, every world you burned. I am here because you failed. The last word cut through her like a blade. Failed. She, the undefeated, the eternal war chief, the breaker of empires, failed. Her scales burned hot. Her claws clenched, but she did not strike. She could not. The weight of his words pressed too heavily on her. Around her, the nobles bowed their heads lower, as though fearing the storm in her heart. The guards looked away, unwilling to meet her eyes. Elias continued, his voice softer now, yet stronger than before. You can kill me. You can cut me down where I stand. But my death will not end us. Humanity is more than flesh and bone. It is memory. It is defiance. It is the spark that refuses to die. And even if you burn me to ash, others will rise, just as I have. The chamber was so quiet that even the flames in the bowls seemed to still. Asera stared at him, her breath heavy, her mind torn apart by the truth she could no longer deny. The fire of humanity had not died with their fleets. It had not died with the last general. It had lived, hidden, waiting, burning brighter in the shadows. And now it stood before her in chains. Her blade shook at her side. Every part of her screamed to silence him, to prove him wrong, to protect the lie she had built her throne upon. But instead, her heart whispered what her pride refused to say. He is right. The great throne chamber, once filled with whispers, now felt suffocating. The nobles pressed against the walls, their scaled faces pale with unease. The guards stood stiff, hands on their weapons, waiting for their war chief's command. All eyes rested on Asera, but Asera's eyes did not move from the human. His words still echoed in her mind, sharp as a blade. I am proof of your failure. Her claws scraped the stone floor, and finally, with a low growl, she raised her hand. Leave us. The command rolled like thunder through the chamber. At first, no one moved, for none wished to be the first to turn their back. Then the nobles bowed quickly, retreating through the high doors. The guards obeyed more slowly, their eyes flicking to the prisoner as though they feared to leave their war chief alone with him. Go! Asera barked, her voice harder. Do not return until I call. The last soldier hesitated, then obeyed. The doors shut with a deep boom, leaving only the crackle of firelight. Now there was silence. Only two remained in the vast throne chamber, the war chief and the human who should not exist. Asera walked slowly down the steps of her throne. Her claws tapped against the black stone. Her breath came heavier than before, though she forced herself to keep her head high. She circled him like a predator, her eyes cold, though her heart was restless. You have courage, she said finally, her voice low. Too much, perhaps. Do you think your words will break me? Elias did not look away. No, he said simply. I do not speak to break you. I speak because the truth cannot be buried forever. Her chest tightened. The truth. That word cut her deeper than any blade. You know nothing of truth, she hissed, stepping closer. You know nothing of what I did, of why I did it. Your kind threatened the Dominion. Your kind refused peace, refused surrender. You forced me to destroy you. Elias shook his head. The chains rattled, but his voice remained calm. No, you feared us. Not our ships, not our weapons, but us. You feared that spirit you could not crush. That is why you tried to erase us. That is why you still tremble now. Asera froze. Her eyes narrowed, but she could not deny what he said. She remembered too well the madness of human defiance, their refusal to kneel, their willingness to burn their own worlds rather than submit. She remembered how it had unsettled her even in victory. She had thought time would bury those memories, but this man had dragged them back into the light. You think I fear you, she said, though her voice cracked. Elias did not smile, but his eyes softened with something strange. Pity. I think you fear the truth. You built your empire on the claim that humanity was gone. You told your people the fire was extinguished. And yet here I stand, still burning. His words hung heavy in the hall. The flames along the walls flickered as if echoing his defiance. Asera turned from him, her claws tightening into fists. She walked toward her throne, but each step felt heavier than the last. Her mind swirled with images she had long buried. Burning worlds, screaming voices, the face of the last general she had slain. 2 centuries she had carried pride. 2 centuries she had worn her victory like armor. But now, cracks spread through it, and beneath she felt the weight of guilt. She sat heavily on her throne and pressed her claws against her face. For the first time in 200 years, her heart whispered questions she had silenced long ago. What if I was wrong? What if their fire was never meant to die? When she lowered her claws, Elias was still watching her. Not with hatred, but with the same steady eyes that had faced her even in chains. You can kill me, he said softly, but it will not change what you feel inside. The blood you spilled will follow you. The screams of the fallen will never leave you. Humanity does not forget, and neither do you. Asera felt something inside her break. Not her power, not her rule, but the shield around her heart. For a fleeting moment, she was not the war chief of the Dominion. She was simply Asera, a warrior who had done what she believed was necessary, yet could not escape the ghosts of her choices. Her voice was a whisper. Why now? Why return after all these years? Elias answered, his tone carrying both sorrow and strength. Because the galaxy suffers under your hand. Worlds fall as ours once did, and they call for someone to stand against you. We remember the fire you tried to bury, and we are here to remind you. Fire spreads, his words struck her deeper than any blade. Her claws dug into the throne, but her heart felt weaker than ever. She had crushed countless species, broken countless enemies, yet none had ever stood before her and spoken like this. None had ever made her question her own soul. Now in the silence of the hall, Asera felt the weight of guilt pressing down, heavier than her crown, heavier than her throne, and she could not breathe. The throne chamber was quiet, the air heavy with tension. The fires burned low, their glow casting long shadows across the black stone floor. Asera sat on her throne, her claws drumming against the armrest as her eyes fixed on the human standing below. His presence was a wound that would not close, a truth she could not deny. For too long she had lived in the certainty of her victory. Yet this man, fragile in body but unbroken in spirit, had shaken that certainty with nothing but his words. His defiance gnawed at her, pulling her deeper into memories she had long buried. Finally, she rose to her feet. Her tall frame moved with the slow grace of a predator, her crimson scales catching the light of the fire bowls. She stepped down from her throne, stopping only a breath away from the prisoner. Ilias did not look away. He stood straight despite the heavy chains that bound his wrists. His dark eyes held no fear. "You speak boldly," Asera said, her voice low and sharp. "But bold words mean nothing when spoken in chains." Her clawed hand moved, and with a swift gesture she signaled the locking clasps. The chains snapped open, clattering to the floor. The sound echoed like thunder in the empty chamber. Elias flexed his wrist slowly, but he did not move away. He did not run. He simply stood there, free yet still unshaken. Asera circled him, her tail sweeping behind her. "Now you are unbound. You stand before me with nothing between us. If you wish to strike me, strike. If you wish to flee, flee. Show me what your so-called spirit truly is." Elias met her gaze. His hands, though free, did not reach for her throat. His legs, though unchained, did not run for the door. He stood calm, his presence steady, as though the chains had never mattered. "I do not need to strike you," he said quietly, "and I will not run. My strength is not in escape nor in killing you. My strength is in standing here unbroken while you try to bend me." Her jaw tightened. These words were not what she expected. Most prisoners, when freed, either fled in desperation or attacked with madness. But this man, he did neither. "Do you not hate me?" she demanded, her voice rougher now. "Do you not hate the hand that burned your people to ash?" Elias's eyes softened, though his voice remained firm. "I do not waste myself on hate. Hate only chains the heart. I remember instead. I carry the memory of my people, the fire of their courage, the defiance they gave their lives for. That memory cannot be broken." Asera's claws flexed. She stepped closer, her shadow falling over him. "Then why stand here? Why face me at all if not to strike me down?" Elias's voice deepened with conviction. "Because this is not about killing you. This is about proving what you refuse to believe, that humanity cannot be destroyed. You thought you ended us, yet here I stand, alive, unbowed, a flame that will spread again." The words rang in her ears louder than the drums of war. She searched his face for weakness, for fear, but there was none. He spoke not with arrogance, but with certainty, and that certainty unsettled her more than any weapon ever could. Her chest felt heavy. She remembered again the war, humans fighting in hopeless battles, refusing to kneel, choosing death before surrender. And now she saw it once more, here in this man who did not need chains to prove his defiance. Slowly, almost unwillingly, Asera lifted her war blade from its sheath. The steel gleamed with the reflection of fire. She pointed the tip at his chest. "One strike," she growled. "One strike, and I end what I began 200 years ago. Give me one reason not to." Elias did not flinch. He did not step back. His voice was steady as stone. "Because killing me will change nothing. Humanity is not flesh alone. It is will. It is memory. It is fire. You can kill me here and now, but you cannot kill what I carry. Others will rise. Others will remember. And in the end, it is not I who will be haunted. It will be you." Asera's grip on the blade tightened, her arm trembling. She had ended countless lives without hesitation. Yet now, standing before this one man, she could not strike. Something inside her screamed to silence him, but something deeper whispered that his words were true. The weight of his gaze pressed on her. His presence was more dangerous than any army she had faced because he carried not weapons but truth. Her blade lowered slowly, her claws shaking. For the first time in centuries, she felt powerless. Elias stood tall, no chains on his wrists, no weapon in his hands, and yet he had won. Asera stepped back, her breath heavy, her mind in turmoil. She had tested him, but it was she who had been tested, and she knew with painful clarity that she had failed. The throne chamber remained silent after the clash of words. The fire burned low, flickering like the breath of a dying beast. Asera stood with her blade lowered, her chest rising and falling in deep, uneven breaths. The weight of the weapon in her hand felt heavier than iron, as if all the blood it had spilled had settled into her bones. Elias did not move. His face was calm, his body still, his eyes steady upon her. That quiet strength seemed to echo through the room louder than any battle cry. He had not lifted a hand against her, yet she felt as though he had struck her heart. Asera turned away sharply, unwilling to meet that gaze. Her claws scraped against the stone wall as she walked back to her throne. She sat heavily as though her body was suddenly older, weaker. The firelight reflected in her crimson eyes, but it did not warm them. "You do not understand what you are saying," she muttered, her voice low and rough. "You speak of memory, of fire. But I burned it all. I crushed your cities, I silenced your voices. There is nothing left but ghosts." Elias shook his head slowly. "You are wrong. You destroyed homes, yes. You killed people, yes. But you did not kill humanity. Ghosts do not haunt you, Asera. Living memory does. You destroyed our bodies, but our spirit outlived your war. I am proof of that." Her claws clenched on the throne. The words pierced deeper than any blade. She wanted to roar, to silence him, to prove him wrong. But inside her chest there was only a hollow ache, a shadow she had carried for 2 centuries. She leaned forward, her voice trembling with anger she could not control. "Do not speak to me of spirit. I watched your kind slaughter my warriors. I saw your flames consume my world as well as your own. Do you think your people were pure? They were monsters, creatures of war." Elias's expression hardened, though his tone remained calm. "Yes, we were monsters at times. We fought, we killed, we burned. But we also built, we dreamed, we loved. We carried both the fire that destroys and the fire that warms. And you," his eyes locked with hers. "You chose to see only the part that made it easier to kill us." Asera's breath caught in her throat. His words tore open wounds she had sealed long ago. Memories surged before her eyes. The last human stronghold burning. The cries of children silenced beneath the roar of her armies. The defiant faces of those who refused to bow. She had told herself it was necessary, that it was war, that her people's survival demanded it. But the truth was sharper. She had feared them. Her claws shook as she gripped the arms of her throne. "You do not know what I saw," she whispered, her voice breaking. "You do not know what I felt when your kind would not fall. When even in death your people cursed me with their eyes. Do you think I wanted this? Do you think I wanted their screams in my dreams?" Elias stepped closer, his footsteps soft but firm against the stone floor. "Then why did you do it? Why finish the war when you already knew you could not break them?" She looked up sharply, her eyes blazing with fury and sorrow. "Because I was afraid." The confession burst from her lips before she could stop it. The sound echoed across the chamber like a cry of pain. "I was afraid of your kind, afraid of your strength, afraid of the way you refused to die even when you should have. I thought if I crushed every last one of you I could silence that fear. But it did not work. It never worked." Her voice cracked, and for the first time in centuries the great war chief trembled. Elias looked at her, his face calm, but touched with sadness. He saw now not just the conqueror who had burned his people, but the weary soul behind the armor, the being who had carried her own chains longer than any prisoner. "You see," he said softly, "you thought chains could break us, but all they did was prove that spirit cannot be crushed. And now you are the one bound, not by iron, but by the weight of what you did." Asera bowed her head. The firelight caught the faint shimmer of moisture in her eyes. She had never allowed herself to cry, not once, not even when the war had taken her own kin. But now, with this human standing before her unbroken, the walls she had built around her heart began to crack. "I destroyed your people," she whispered, almost to herself. "I ended their world. And still, you stand." Elias did not smile, but there was a quiet strength in his reply. "Yes, because humanity is not just in numbers. It is in every act of defiance, every refusal to kneel, every spark carried forward. Even in me alone it burns, and one day it will burn brighter again." Asera closed her eyes, his words wrapped around her like chains of truth, tighter than any she had placed on him. She felt the weight of her centuries pressing down, the endless nights of silence, the empty victories that had given her nothing but shame. and for the first time, she realized she was not staring at the last ember of humanity. She was staring at the mirror of her own failure. The silence in the chamber grew deep. The fire burned low, shadows dancing across the black stone walls. Asera's claws loosened from the throne. Her blade rested beside her, forgotten for the moment. Her breath was heavy, her heart restless. The great war chief who once thought herself unshakable now sat with her head lowered, facing not a prisoner but the truth she had buried for 200 years. The chamber was silent. Only the fire cracked weakly in the pit, its glow trembling like the last heartbeat of a dying star. Asera sat upon her throne, her head bowed, her claws curled against the stone. For the first time in 2 centuries, she felt smaller than the shadow of her own deeds. Elias stood before her, unbound in spirit though chains still hung from his wrists. His face was calm, his eyes steady. He did not press her. He did not demand. He only waited, as though he already knew her choice would matter not only to him, but to her entire people. Her voice was rough when it came. I should kill you now, end this. If I silence you, I silence the voice that stirs the ghosts of my past. Elias tilted his head, his chains rattling softly. You can kill me, Asera, but you cannot kill the truth. Even if you strike me down, the memory of humanity will remain with you. You have carried it for 200 years already. You will carry it for as long as you live. His words struck deep. She wanted to snarl, to roar, to rise and end him, but instead she stayed seated, her shoulders trembling. Memories surged before her eyes. Children crying, cities burning, human soldiers singing even as they fell. And her own warriors, once fearless, looking at her with doubt when the war dragged on longer than it should have. A low growl escaped her throat. You are cruel, she whispered. Crueler than any blade. You speak and I bleed. Elias did not flinch. No, I only show you the wounds you already carry. The silence stretched, heavy as chains. Finally, Asera rose. Her tall frame loomed over him, her armor catching the dim light. She lifted her sword, the black edge gleaming. Elias lifted his chin unafraid. He did not plead. He did not close his eyes. He simply stood, ready to face whatever end she chose for him. The war chief's claws tightened on the hilt. Her breath shook. She saw herself, Asera the conqueror, Asera the destroyer, the one who had erased a species. The galaxy knew her as invincible, merciless. Yet here she stood, blade trembling before one unarmed man. No, she whispered, her voice breaking. I cannot. The blade fell, not upon him, but to the floor with a ringing clang. The sound echoed like thunder in the chamber. Asera staggered back a step, her chest heaving. She pressed her claws against her face as if to hide the storm raging inside. Elias's chains rattled as he moved closer, though still bound. You chose mercy, he said softly. Her hands dropped. Her eyes were wet, though she hated to show it. No, I chose truth. I cannot kill what is already inside me. Your spirit, your people, it lives here. She struck her own chest with her clawed fist, and it has haunted me long enough. For a long moment, neither spoke. The firelight flickered between them, painting the chamber in gold and shadow. Finally, Elias said, Then let it guide you instead of haunt you. You cannot erase the past, Asera, but you can choose what you become now. Her eyes narrowed, filled with doubt and pain. And what would I become, human? A traitor to my own people? A war chief who bends to the memory of her enemies? You would become free, Elias answered simply. Free from the chains you forged around your own heart. Free to lead with more than fear. Free to honor both your people and mine. Asera turned away, her body shaking. The word free echoed in her ears like a forgotten song. For centuries, she had thought victory was freedom. But victory had given her nothing. Only silence, emptiness, nightmares. She looked back at Elias. He stood tall, unbroken despite the iron around his wrists. In that moment, she realized he was freer than she had ever been. Slowly, with heavy steps, she moved toward him. She raised her claws, and instead of striking, she reached for the chains. With a swift motion, she shattered the locks. The sound of breaking metal rang out like the toll of a bell. Elias rubbed his wrists, the marks of captivity red against his skin. Yet his eyes held no hatred, only quiet resolve. You are free, Asera said, her voice rough. But know this, I do not release you out of weakness. I release you because I can no longer bear the lie I built around myself. Humanity lives, and She paused, the words heavy on her tongue. I will carry that truth. Elias bowed his head slightly in respect. Then you have already taken the first step toward redemption, she scoffed, though her tone lacked its usual venom. Redemption? I doubt I will ever deserve that. Perhaps not, Elias said, but the path is not about what you deserve. It is about what you choose. Asera turned away, staring into the fire. The flames flickered high, casting light across the black stone walls. For the first time in centuries, she felt the fire not as a reminder of destruction, but as a symbol of warmth, of something that could burn without consuming. The chamber remained silent, but it was no longer the silence of death. It was the silence of something new beginning, fragile yet unshakable. Elias stood free, humanity alive in him, and Asera, the great war chief, stood with a choice she had never imagined, whether to remain the shadow of destruction or to step into the uncertain light of change. For the first time, she did not feel like the destroyer. She felt human, and in that perhaps there was hope.